Let's talk evangelism. A recent survey found that 85% of Christians don't share the gospel on a regular basis. In today's video, I'm going to give you 4 reasons why that is. Well, hi there. Thanks for joining me again as we seek to encourage, equip and enthuse everyone to become more involved and more effective in evangelism. In one of the previous videos, we looked at 3 reasons why every Christian ought to evangelize. If you missed it, there's a link in the notes below, so take a look. But while we know that we should be sharing the gospel with others, if we're honest, most of us would have to admit that we don't actually do it all that often. A survey by the American organisation Lifeway found that 91% of Christians had only shared the gospel a few times in the previous 6 months, while 55% of them hadn't done so at all in that period of time. So I think it's fair to say that sharing our faith is something that most of us find quite difficult, isn't it? But why is that? I would actually be very interested to hear your thoughts on that subject. So if you have any thoughts or theories on why Christians don't share their faith more often, perhaps you could leave them in a comment below. But a couple of years ago now, I ran an evangelism training day, and as part of it, I asked people to discuss the main things that prevented them from sharing the gospel. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the top 4 reasons that they came up with. Reason number 1, a lack of faith, otherwise known as fear. As human beings, we all fear failure and we all fear rejection, don't we? And both of these are very real concerns for us when it comes to sharing our faith. A survey by the Christian research group Barna found that 9 out of 10 Christians who have attempted to share their faith have come away from those experiences feeling as if they failed. Now, most of us don't keep doing things that make us feel like failures, do we? So it's little wonder that we give up on evangelism after a bad experience or 2. 3 things to remember though. Firstly, the reality is that very few people will actually respond angrily or abusively to us sharing the gospel with them. Generally speaking, if people are not interested, they will be fairly polite about it. So that is one fear that we very often get drastically out of proportion in our thinking. We've got this idea that everyone is going to reject us, everyone is going to give us abuse, everyone is going to mock us as soon as we open our mouths to share the gospel. That is most certainly not the case. Secondly, however feeble and failing we feel our attempts to evangelise might be, we should remember that God can still use them. So don't despair if you feel inadequate. The truth is, we all do. We all feel inadequate when it comes to evangelism, and in a sense, we all are. The Bible teaches that salvation is of the Lord. And so we've just got to depend on Him, seek His help, and pray for His blessing upon our efforts. And thirdly, like everything else in life, we'll get better at it with practice, and we can learn from our previous experiences, even if they haven't gone particularly well. You know, even the great apostle Paul felt weak and fearful when he arrived to evangelise the city of Corinth. But God used the efforts of that weak and fearful man to make a great impact upon that city. The Lord said to him, "Be not afraid, but speak, for I am with you." Reason number 2, a lack of knowledge. I suppose this is really another type of fear, isn't it? We're worried that we might not know all the answers to all the questions that we might get asked when we start to share our faith with someone. Well, the truth is, we probably won't know all the answers to all the questions we could potentially get asked. But I've found over the years that most of the questions people do ask fall into just a few key categories. And with a little bit of reading and a little bit of research in these particular areas, we can equip ourselves to be better prepared for these most frequently asked questions. And of course, we should never be afraid to say to someone that we don't know the answer to their question, but that we'll do our best to find it and then get back to them. People usually appreciate that kind of honesty and effort on their behalf. And so we don't need to know the Bible inside out, upside down and back to front before we start to evangelise. Reason number 3, a lack of time. Now, to me, this is really just a poor excuse rather than a valid reason for not sharing the gospel. Remember, we noticed in one of the previous videos that the starting point for evangelism is where we are, among the people we already have contact with. So it's not necessarily the case that we need to set aside an hour or two every week to specifically engage in evangelistic activities. If we're looking for them, we'll find opportunities that arise in our regular day-to-day interactions with people, which won't really involve any great additional investment of time. And of course, we can incorporate evangelism into other activities we may already be doing as well. For example, maybe rather than just going out for a walk for some fresh air or exercise, we could get some gospel literature to distribute and still get the fresh air and exercise whilst also doing our bit to spread the gospel. And besides all that, if we analyse it honestly, perhaps we'd have to admit that our perceived lack of time is because we're often guilty of wasting a fair bit of time. Colossians chapter 4 verse 5 encourages us to walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of the time. Reason number 4, a lack of opportunity, or perhaps better put, a perceived lack of opportunity. Because the reason we often feel we aren't getting opportunities to share the gospel is simply because we're not looking for them. So we need to pray for opportunities and then proactively look for opportunities. The old chorus is worth praying over every morning. Lead me to some soul today. Teach me, Lord, just what to say. I actually remember mentioning this point whilst preaching a couple of years ago. And someone told me later that they had taken the point on board, which is always a good thing. And they had prayed very specifically that God would give them an opportunity to share the gospel the following day. And lo and behold, the very next day, a colleague of theirs out of the blue asked them a question about their faith, giving them a great opportunity to share the gospel. So let's ask the Lord to give us openings. And let's ask the Lord to help us to take these opportunities when they arise. It's a prayer that God will always answer. In Colossians chapter 4, Paul asked the Christians he was writing to pray for us, that God may open a door for our message. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. So Paul was praying for opportunities to share the gospel and for help to make the most of them when they came. So there it is, 4 things preventing us from sharing the gospel. A lack of faith, a lack of knowledge, a lack of time, and a lack of opportunities. Some are no doubt perfectly legitimate reasons, others are perhaps fairly poor excuses, but all of them are fairly easily overcome. Now, I hope that this video has been a help to you today. Please remember to leave a comment below with what you think are the main reasons Christians don't share their faith more often. And of course, if you've got any suggestions as to how we can overcome some of these things that we've been thinking about today that hold us back from evangelizing, please share them with us too. So that's all for this week. I'll be back again next week with another evangelism themed video. But until then, goodbye and God bless.